Okay, why don't we get started? I think the signing in has stabilized. Joshua Breitbart, Senior Vice President for ConnectALL. Saw some familiar faces and names in the gallery, some new faces and names. Looking forward to meeting anybody who I haven't yet had a chance to meet with. Thank you so much for participating in this forum. Thank you to those who participated in our last forum. This will be a similar structure, and we will have a little, we won't have so much of an overview of ConnectALL because most of you have probably heard that, hopefully multiple times, but if anybody wants more information generally on ConnectALL, please let me know. Can we just go into the first slide? So the topic today is working with Empire State Development. So give a brief overview. We'll go through, we are going to be joined today by Danielle Adams from Empire State Development's Office of Contract and Supplier Diversity, Brendan Healy from our Loans and Grants Division, and Matthew Kennedy from our Small Business and Technology Development Division. Could go to the next slide. So again, as I said, we had one forum where you got to engage with our federal program officers. And again, we're following up with some of the questions that people had to put together a Q&A for those answers, A's for those Q's. The topic today is working with New York State, and we're going to be continuing this forum with topics including workforce development, training and retention, network resilience, but very open to your suggestions of what topics we should focus on. We have multiple programs, multiple federal grant sources, many policy decisions to make, and we're looking for your input on those and many aspects of what we can do, and we want your input on what we can do to support you. And that's really the main focus of today. Empire State Development is the state's economic development agency. It's a great privilege to me and to ConnectALL to be a part of this department. And that includes being able to work with these great divisions and colleagues to support you and to support the overall economic impact of these investments in broadband. Just to start, we want to put up a poll to see who in this forum has worked with Empire State Development in the past, to get a sense of where you are coming from. We know that many of you may have participated in previous broadband grant programs, but we also know that there's continued growth and opportunity in this area, and we want to just understand in terms of this forum who's participating. So it'd be great if you could all take a moment to answer that poll. And again, please, the way we'll structure this is there'll be presentations. There'll be a brief opportunity for Q&A after each presentation. You can use the chat function as we're going through to add questions in there, or the raise hand function. We want this to be conversational, so this is set up not as a webinar, but as a forum. And then there'll be discussion questions at the end, where we'll have a chance to engage further. So we may not get to every question in the time allotted, but again, we'll take that in. We'll put together answers. And we will get back to you. We really appreciate your engagement, the opportunity to share this information and make sure that we're orienting every aspect of this program to maximize participation and benefit of these grants. So with that, we can move into interesting results. With that, we can move into the presentation from Danielle Adams from the Office of Contractor and Supplier Diversity. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh, for the brief introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to be participating on this forum. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of our office, our role and responsibility. So the Office of Contractor and Supply Diversity is responsible for the assessment and application of minority and women-owned business enterprise goals for all of ESD's programs, including contracts, grants, procurements in accordance with 15A of the New York State Executive Law and all of its associated regulations and requirements. In addition, we also provide ongoing technical assistance to our internal stakeholders, grantees, prime vendors, and subcontractors while monitoring and tracking MWBE utilization to clients. Next slide, please. Okay, a part of adhering to 15A for grantees, we have participation requirements. Those requirements are for the approval of funding by ESD that's conditioned upon the recipient to agree to fully complying and cooperate with ESD's implementation of 15A. The following requirements include: 1, the recipient is required to use good faith efforts by identifying subcontracting opportunities to participate with MWBAs based on project budget and scope to achieve our statewide agency goal of 30% during the entire performance of the project. 2, the recipient is required to submit what we call a EEO policy statement. And then 3, the recipient is also required to complete a staffing plan, but that's contingent upon the value of your grant award. If your grant award is valued at or over $250,000, you're required to submit this form, and that includes contractors and or subcontractors that are participating on your project. Next slide, please. Okay, in addition to those forms, the recipient is also required to submit what we call a utilization plan. This plan is required to be submitted within 10 days of your incentive proposal execution date. We do allow an extension, but you would need to provide an explanation and also reference the additional time that's needed to provide a MWB utilization plan. And after your utilization plan is submitted, if there are any changes to your plan with regard to the addition or removal of MWBE subs and or if contract values change, you're required to also submit a revised utilization plan. After this plan is submitted, the recipient and or the contractor is required to report monthly MWBE utilization, either on the New York State contract system and or manually using our compliance payment report. Next slide. Okay, in addition to the utilization plan, just some emphasis, identifying MWBEs for participation. I know this is a hot topic, especially for this program, but just quickly, for meaningful participation, we require grantees and or contractors to identify MWBE firms on the New York State Directory of Certified Firms that can be located on the New York State contract system. For searching MWBEs, we recommend that grantees use NAICS codes to identify MWBE firms that can participate on the project. In addition to that, our office also provides support in identifying MWBE firms for maximum participation. Also, I just wanted to make a note as well. I know this question comes up a lot. MWBEs identified must be certified through the Division of Minority and Women Business Development. And the only location to verify the certification is on the New York State contract system. Next slide. Okay, with experience in this program, I understand that a lot of the work is specialized in nature. So we understand that contractors also identified firms that are not MWBEs that could potentially be MWBEs that may be eligible for certification. So one of the options to become certified quickly than the regular process for certification, there are other New York State certifications that the Division of Women, Minority and Women Business Development considers to expedite, which are the following New York State fast track partners below. Also, if a contractor has identified a non-certified MWBE firm that performs a specific or specialized scope of work where there lacks available MWBEs, we may consider submitting an expedite review request should they not have those certification types mentioned above. The firm must have a pending application in order to submit the expedite review request. Next slide. Okay, another topic to highlight, good faith efforts. This is a standard that is applied to our participation requirements. This is proactive and ongoing efforts that we require grantees to perform, of which requires documenting good faith efforts. And if found that the recipient is not demonstrating good faith efforts willfully and intentionally, there is a possibility that it may recapture some of the grant proceeds, which we, in other words, would be the unmet utilization that you could not achieve, right? But if you did document good faith efforts, then you would be able to submit, I don't like using the W word, but a waiver request should you have exhausted and maximized all your good faith efforts in identifying MWBEs. Next slide. Hey, I just wanted to provide some examples of what good faith effort documentation is. It could be, you know, copies of solicitations that were sent to the MWBE firms that you've identified, copies of advertisements, right? If you may have, you know, posted a bid on the New York State Contract Reporter or any local publications, or even your organization's website. The most important documentation that we definitely consider as strong good faith efforts is copies of your directory search results that highlight the firms that you've contacted, which would follow number one, the copies of your solicitations for firms that you've identified on the directory. Next slide. Okay, and if you need any additional resources or information on the MWBE program for ESD's Office of Contractor and Supplier Diversity, please feel free to access our website on ESD's website. In addition, if you have any certification questions, that can be found on the divisions page within our ESD's website link. And below the business development unit, this unit helps firms, including New York State agencies and authorities, identify MWBE firms to participate on state contracts and grant programs as well. Okay. I think I may have enough time for Q&A. If there's no questions to be asked right now, feel free to put your questions in the chat and I'll respond as soon as I can. Thank you. And that's it. I believe that's the end of my section.
And I believe the answer, Craig, I believe the answer to your question is yes, we're going to be sharing these slides and make this one of the resources that's available.
Great, thank you, Josh.
And, Danielle, did you see the question from Wade?
Yes, MWBEs, can the 30% be one or the other? So it depends. We either assign an overall goal or a split goal of 30%. So when we receive a grantee's project and budget, we conduct what we call a goal setting process, which, you know, we review, unpack your project budget. We also on our end conduct searches in the directory to determine the number of available MWBEs within that region. Right, depending on budget, if you have a pretty large budget where a goal can be met with both M's and W's, and that's when we would assign a split goal. But there's varying factors that we take into account when we assign overall goals and split goals. But in regards to the national certification, I do know that it's not there's no reciprocity for the fast track partners for national certified firms, so they wouldn't receive the fast track eligibility requirement. But what we can do is if they happen to perform scope of work that's specialized in nature, and we also identify that there lacks available MWBEs, then you would then, submit a request to us to expedite a certification application for this firm, right? But they have to have a pending application in queue already to request and expedite with the division.
Danielle, let me just also add an emphasis to that. I think one of the reasons for doing this forum now is if there are firms that you have worked with or you expect to want to work with, including those national firms, now is a good time to connect with us to reach out to them and support them getting into the certification process so that they would meet that goal.
Correct. Okay, the next question is, if you're not using contractors, do we still have to use MWBEs? Yes, we just require you to demonstrate good faith efforts, right? So actually, I need some further clarification on that question. Do you mean that if you're not subcontracting any work out, if you're not procuring any supplies or materials at all with any vendors, right, then because there are no subcontracting opportunities, then what we could potentially do, right, is submit an in-year exclusion, but you would have to provide that justification.
Pat, rather than racing.
Yeah, because they're answering questions that are being typed.
Right. So Daniel, it includes supplier, not just contractor. Right. That's why it's contractor and supplier diversity, because if they're equipment suppliers, that's another opportunity for MWBE participation.
Correct. Right. You're going to want to look at your overall project budget, right? All of your project expenditures. If we ask that you identify any opportunities for participation, whether that be with MWBE supplier or subcontractor.
Should we take a question from Lee? So you have your hand up. You got to come off mute though, Lee.
There. Yes, we have Make Ready and tree trimming contractor that does a lot of work. It's high value, but probably 80% of it is reimbursed by NYSEG. Would it be possible to get the portion that's reimbursed considered for the MWBE somehow?
This is with their contract. Wait, they're with NYSEG?
Well, what happens is that we are designated to get the Make Ready work done. NYSEG gives us a print and a list of contractors and says, here it is. But a lot of it is their responsibility to pay for. And so we get the work all arranged and we get a bill to us from the contractor, and then we bill NYSEG for it. It's sort of a convoluted setup. And our contractor is MWBE, but NYSEG pays the lion's share, especially they pay 100% of the tree trimming for one.
Okay, so then we wouldn't account for that in assessing goals within your project budget, right? Especially if NYSEG is paying for these services, or if you're required to participate with these firms through NYSEG's, say, I take it it's a pre-qualification vendor list. So we would then just ask you to look in other areas within your project budget to attain utilization.
I mean, it is a choice we make to choose the MWBE, and it is a tremendous amount of the value in the end.
So
probably, probably if we use this contractor, if we use that money, it would cover the whole thing at 30%, I would think.
So the only question I would have, right, that I don't know offhand right now is if NYSEG is a reporting 15A agency, because if they're reporting MWBE utilization to the state, which is the division, the regulatory agency, then we wouldn't be able to account that utilization that you're achieving with NYSEG. So that's something that I would have to look into.
Okay.
But if they're not,
we'll probably certainly, value that benefit of that, but I think what Danielle's point is that it applies to the grant funds, so it's not part of the grant budget. I think generally it wouldn't apply.
Okay.
But we can continue that conversation.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. That was the next point I was going to make. It has to do with your actual project that's being reimbursed with this ESD program. Okay.
Why don't you take the last question from Craig, and then we'll move on. And again, we'll follow up with all these questions and any others that come up.
To get started with the AMI criteria, just so we understand the lead time. Great question. Currently, right now, it depends, right? So say if this firm submits all the required documentation for review for certification, I would say the turnaround time is up to 6 months. I don't want to make any promises, but from my understanding, it's anywhere between 3 to 6 months for a firm to become certified who's not already certified.
Okay, so thank you. And then Wade and Sean, noting your questions, and either later or in follow-up Q&A, we'll make sure to get you those answers. And again, if you've got other questions, please drop them in the chat. Danielle, thank you so much. And I just want to again emphasize that this is an important aspect of the economic development benefits of these programs, as intended by Congress, as intended by the state legislature. And we do take this part of the program, it's an important value, and we encourage you to work with us in our office and with Danielle's office as early in the stage as possible to facilitate this part of the program. Moving to loans and grants, Brendan Healy. Thank you so much, Brendan. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Josh. Thank you all for attending and letting me speak. So my name is Brendan Healy. I'm a Vice President in Empire State Development's Loans and Grants Department. So my department, we work with a number of different groups here at ESD, including ConnectALL office on various grants that they're administering. So obviously Danielle spoke about the MWB targets. That is one important requirement to be aware of, to be mindful of, especially early on as you get grant awards. There are some additional requirements that I'd like to touch on in this forum. So for any grantee, there will be upcoming grant solicitations, and for those that are successful, receive their grant awards. So at the point in time that you receive the grant award, it's important to be aware that there are going to be various, for example, insurance requirements that are that we'll look to put in to have grantees put in place, for both grantees and the various subcontractors that are doing work on these various capital improvements, infrastructure related projects. In addition, across the board, there is, we want to make sure that there are, call it a certain level of responsibility for our grantees. So, what we think of as, grantees have to be, organized properly, duly organized, currently validly existing, and in good standing. And what we do, what the ConnectALL office will do is, as grant awards are being made, there will be a dedicated project manager, from the ConnectALL team assigned to each grantee, each grant award. And I think of that project manager as there to, really help guide through the process, it was informative. The poll that I saw, I think from what I gathered, it sounds like a good number have already been through our process, which I would say in general expect the same. If you have had grants in the past with ESD, expect it to be the same general process. So I think that's helpful to know that a good number are already somewhat familiar, and that project manager is there. Whether or not you've been through the process before or it's your first time, to really help shepherd and, allow you to implement your project. And, the project manager is there, any questions, really to help guide through any steps, and ultimately through the reimbursement process. So one thing to keep in mind is, like I said, reimbursement process. So ESD's grants, they are performance-based reimbursement grants. So, on the front end, after applications are submitted, the ConnectALL team will do its review and ultimately select the grant recipients. And it's important to keep in mind that we're not cutting checks at that point. Really, the award is the green light to go ahead and for the grantees to go ahead and start to implement their projects. And ESD in general, since we administer reimbursement grants, we do defer to the grantees to set up, figure out how they are bridging our grant, if you will. So be it maybe additional equity, maybe it's construction or, construction financing line of credit. But that's just something to be, thinking about as you do your application. And if you are, fortunate enough to get a grant award, just to understand how you are planning to financially implement the project, and to ultimately, bridge our funds for that ultimate reimbursement. And, it probably goes without saying, Josh hinted at, a lot of federal grant funding that we're administering. There is, just across the board, a desire for, any of our grant awards, they're not awards in perpetuity. We will look to, to monitor, and that's where the project manager comes in. There'll be an expectation, understanding of how long the grantee believes that it's going to take to implement the project. And look, along the way, there may be some hiccups, that we may be able to consider extensions if there's if there's strong justification, but there is going to be a good amount of just tracking that we're going to need to see to ensure that the funds are being utilized in a timely fashion, because I know that we're going to have to answer to the federal government, for example, and we don't have limitless time. That it is somewhat limited in terms of deploying the funds. And one last thing, not on the slide, but I would want to touch on, at least to convey the message. It's important to keep in mind in the various solicitations or requests for applications, they will touch on it, but it's important to keep in mind that with all of our grants, there is an eligible expense date that grantees cannot incur costs prior to the eligible cost date. That typically is going to be the award date. So, so just be mindful if, as these solicitations come out, if your organization is deciding to submit an application, just still, I think of it as it's still in a holding pattern that, you really need to hold off on incurring any expenses until you get that good news that that your entity is in fact receiving grant funds. So that is something that we will track, and you don't want to find out well after the award date that we cannot accept expenses that were incurred maybe pre-application or even during the time where you applied, but you're waiting to hear back from ESD if you're getting a grant. So can't stress it enough that just to keep in mind that eligible cost date and when you can in fact start incurring expenses. Next slide, please. And I think, this is probably a fairly quick slide. Not sure if how many of you it's going to apply to, but in addition to the previous slide is really across the board for all of our grantees. In the event that your entity is a not-for-profit, there are, something to be aware of, and it's not at the application stage. You're perfectly fine to submit an application if you're a not-for-profit, if you still don't have these items in place. But before we can enter into a contract with a not-for-profit, there are these 3 items. There's the New York State Grants Gateway system that not-for-profits need to be pre-qualified in. And then not-for-profits also need to be registered and up to date with all of their filings with the New York State Office of Attorney General's Charities Bureau. And the last item that pertains to not-for-profits is also registered and up to date with the with all relevant filings with New York State's Office of State Controllers VendRep system. So again, these 3 items relevant just for not-for-profits, and again, does not need to be in place prior to submitting an application or even receiving notice that you're getting an award, but prior to ESD signing a contract with a not-for-profit, we do need to see that all of these items are in place. And I believe, I thought I saw maybe the chat. Let's see if there's anything related to me. Oh, okay, you know what, it might still be MWB. So I'm happy. I think that covers what I was hoping to cover, and happy to take any questions that anyone has at this point. Okay, I see a question, let's see, from Jim Becker. Let's see, okay, quarterly. Jim is asking if it's still a quarterly submission schedule, target still 30 to 40 days for reimbursement. Okay, so this is in the context, I guess Jim is asking in terms of payment requests. And I know that, some of our programs do allow for what I'll call progress payments, during the course of the project. Others only lump sum reimbursements. I know that we still, unless Josh feels differently, I think that something that we're still looking to flesh out with these various solicitations is how frequent payment requests can be submitted by the various grantees. I don't know, Josh, is there anything, is that going to be more for the, as the RFAs come out, or I don't know if you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think we also just wanted to make sure that we're aligned with the different federal grant rules. But Jim, the point is well taken that you need that on a as frequent basis as possible to be able to have the working capital to move through the next phase of the project. And these are going to, many of these are going to be multi-year projects. So we'll certainly look to do that on as frequent a basis as we can accommodate within ESD and in the bounds of those rules. And then, as Brendan said, we'll clarify that within the RFA or RFAs when they go out.
Thank you, Josh. And maybe I would touch on, ultimately, I guess we'll flesh out the frequency in terms of how often the various grantees can submit the payment request. And when it comes to, each payment request, yes, one thing I would stress is that, and hopefully the ones that have been through the process before have a good sense of what, what the payment requests typically look like. I like to think of it as, the clock does not start ticking until ESD receives a complete payment request. So that's I think half the battle is just being able to package that payment request. So once it's being submitted to our team, that there's very little, nothing missing, very little questions to come up, and that does help, help to efficiently move through our various internal reviews before we ultimately are able to make the disbursement. So it's tough to commit to a time frame. I know you're asking if the target is still 30 to 45 days, but what I can say is that once the complete payment request is submitted, and I think it helps that we're going to have, the dedicated project management from the ConnectALL team. They'll do their thing in terms of the first review and be in a position to get it on for that further review as quickly as possible. And understood that the quicker that we're able to process payment requests, that sort of takes some pressure off the various grantees in terms of fronting, fronting the grant funds.
Just want to also note, Brendan said that part of it comes down to the ConnectALL office having the right level of capacity. That's something that we're looking at, and that's allowed for in the federal grants. So we are looking to play our role in that process of timely submissions and payments. Sean, that's a good question. I think that's probably where we'll start from, but we have to, there's going to be compliance with federal grants that weren't the case for New York. So I think we covered some of that in the previous meeting, but we'll also we can get back to make sure that we provide as much clarity as possible within the confines of the different funding programs. I would also note that when we do that, that's an area, again, these forms are meant as a two-way street. We can't change the federal rules for any of our programs, but we can look at other types of programs that might be possible to do on the state level if they can better facilitate or support participation in the programs. It's generally not going to be something we're going to do, for an individual company. But if it's something that's widespread that we hear from many companies, that will be a motivation to think about how we could facilitate compliance with the state rules, with the federal rules using state programs.
And maybe while I still have the floor, one thing that I should also stress to the various entities that are on the call. When it comes, ultimately for any grant recipient, I think it's so important early on, as you start your spending, just to be very, carefully, containing, collecting all of your invoices, proof of payment, because that is something that, as you get to the point where you're able to be submitting for the reimbursement request, you don't want it to be, trying to track down, where are those invoices, can't find half of the proofs of payment. So, those are, critical pieces that, it just makes it so much easier if you're collecting it all along. Basically those invoices and proof of payments, that's going to be such an important piece of each of the payment requests. So just to make sure you have a system in place that it's easily organized so that when it comes time to triggering disbursement, you're able to fairly easily on your end, compile the payment request.
Brendan, thank you so much. And Danielle, thank you for continuing to respond to questions in the chat. Brendan also, will be, sticking around. So any questions in the chat you may be able to follow up on, or again, we will, be compiling Q&As to support your participation in the programs. Moving on to Matthew Kennedy from EST Small Business and Technology Development. Thank you again, Matthew. This is going to cover a number of programs, probably ones that you may not be familiar with. So again, the opportunity to ask questions, follow up. Thank you, Matt. Take it away.
Hello, everyone. So yes, my name is Matt Kennedy. I am from Empire State Development's Division for Small Business and Technology Development. We want to move on to our next slide. I am from the Access to Capital team in the Division for Small Business. So what I'm going to really be talking about today is some of our capital programs. Next slide, please. The Division of Small Business is specifically set up to help small businesses in New York State, which are 98% of New York State businesses. For the purposes of New York State, a small business is a business with 100 or fewer employees. And we do have an array of different programs that are part of our division that are beyond what I'm going to talk about today. There are really three major groups of programs: our technology-related programs for small businesses, which would be things like our NYSTAR programs and our New York Ventures programs or venture capital programs. We have our New York State Procurement Assistance programs. That would be the New York State Contract Reporter, if you're familiar with it, where agencies post opportunities. And our lending programs and our financial resources, which are what I'm going to talk about today. That's the team that I'm part of. So next slide, please. So our lending programs really fall into two categories. Most of our lending programs are facilitated lending programs. Those are programs that we have set up through outside lenders, where we're not directly issuing these loans. You're going through a third party to receive a loan or to receive assistance, a surety bond, so on and so forth. We do have a handful of direct lending programs as well. I'm not going to talk about those because they're very specific. They're very project-based. They're probably not going to necessarily be applicable to what you do. But most specifically today, I'm going to talk about the contractor financing program, our alternative lending programs, our surety bond assistance program, and our linked deposit program. Those are really the four that I want to talk about. So next slide, please. So you noticed, you see that I mentioned, or in the previous slide, you saw the reference to SSBCI. SSBCI is the State Small Business Credit Initiative, and it was part of the American Rescue Plan. It was signed in 2021, and it is an allocation of money that has been granted to New York State for purposes, small business purposes, that New York State is redeploying through these approved programs, overseen by the federal government. So there are really four major programs that are part of my group. Our Small Business Revolving Loan Fund, which is a loan program, which I'll talk about in a couple moments. The New York Forward Loan Fund 2, which is a brand new program that I'm not going to talk about today because it is not quite ready to be unveiled, but it's essentially going to be an online portal where small businesses can apply for loans. The New York State Bonding Assistance Program, there's an expansion of that program to help with surety bonding for government projects, and our contractor financing program, which is the first thing I'm going to talk about, which is specifically for small businesses working on government funded projects. So next slide, please. So the contractor financing program provides loan loss reserves to incentivize lending intermediaries to create access to capital for small businesses that are working on New York State contracts. So it's designed, contracts, of course, when they're being paid often through federal entities, there can be timing of payment issues and so forth. This is designed to help ease those burdens to small businesses working on contracts. So, for example, your subcontractors, if you've got subcontractors that are waiting while they're waiting to be paid for your grant programs, or from a grant program, and you're waiting to be paid for the grant, and you have to pay your subcontractor small businesses. This is a great program for those small businesses because this is access to capital for them to help complete the work. So the participating lenders offer lines of credit or managed lines of credit for those subcontractors. They're on loans they would not necessarily underwrite under normal circumstances because they can be quite risky. And there are 6 lenders that are part of the program that can offer varying size lines of credit. It's really going to be based upon the contract and what that particular borrower is doing, how long their contract is, what the term or what the amount that they can borrow is going to be. So they are intended to be lines of credit, so the money flows in and out of these programs. So while a business may need $2 million over the course of 2 years, to borrow $2 million total over the course of 2 years to do the work, the line of credit allows them to borrow a much smaller amount of money. The money flows in and out of that line of credit so that their costs for borrowing the money are a lot lower. The risk to the program's a lot lower. The risk to the bank's a lot lower. So that's why they're set up and specifically as lines of credit and managed lines of credit. Now, an eligible contract, a contract that's eligible for this program, needs to be as a prime or subcontractor on a project or procurement that is contracting and executed in the state of New York, that receives all or part of its financial backing from a New York State agency, a New York State municipality, a county, a town, a village, school district, any other legally recognized government entity. This would include a federal contract executed in the state of New York. So essentially, if this project that you're working on that was receiving federal funding or receiving government funding, I should say, can be federal funding, it can potentially be eligible for this. Loans can be used for contract deployment, advances against inventory, construction costs, purchase orders, managing payments and receivables, the vast array of things that you need specifically related to the contract that's part of the program that's being underwritten by the program. And again, that duration of the loan period is based on the borrower's contract to be completed. Generally, the contracts or the lines of credit won't be for more than 18 months. It is up to the lender's discretion to choose what the length of term is going to be. So next slide, please. So how do you apply for one of these loans? The primary point of contact for the borrowers is directly those lenders. We currently have 6 lenders that are part of the program right now. We're going to be adding a 7th. You can get more contact information from them for our contractor financing program at our contractor financing webpage. Next slide, please. To make it easier, I do have that information here, the contacts to begin the process. If you had someone who was looking to get one of these loans, the application process is handled directly by the lenders. Like I said, we will be adding a 7th lender later in the summer. Their information will be available on the website once they come online. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to change gears a little bit to our New York State Bonding Assistance Program. Of course, bonding is a little bit different than your typical loan. When you're doing a prime contract in New York State, oftentimes you are required to have a surety bond or a payment or performance bond. And the Bonding Assistance Program can assist small businesses, city-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses with securing that surety bonding. Surety bonding can be very confusing the first time you get one if you've never done it before, if you've never dealt with a surety company before, because of course, surety bonding is a little bit different than a typical loan because it's about your ability to complete the work, and your experience and your ability to actually complete the work is what the surety bond company is guaranteeing. So ESD provides guarantees of up to 30% or a maximum of $600,000, whichever is less on a bond line or an individual contract bid, bond line, or a payment performance bond related to the work you're doing. We do have technical assistance and training that's available through the program. And again, this is a $22 million SSBCI funded program that is specifically for surety bonds and bidding performance bonds on publicly funded projects, again, in the state of New York. Most specifically, state and city agency-led projects. So next slide, please. So a little bit of the eligibility requirements for how this particular program works. Applicant should be a New York State small business, do have to be based in New York State with fewer than 100 employees. You have to have been in business for at least 2 years. Maximum bond line or project bond size is going to be $2 million, or so $2 million is the maximum project size or bond line that you can have. The business is going to need to have average gross revenue of $400,000 in the last 2 fiscal or calendar years. There are credit score requirements. In this case, you have to have a minimum credit score of 600. Of course, you're going to need previous experience completing similar work because that's what the surety bonding is all about. Can't have any unpaid judgments, warrants, or liens. You shouldn't have any surety losses already on your record, of course. And you need to be pursuing that publicly funded project in New York State that needs a surety bonding. And as I said, unlike a typical loan, there are some significant due diligence requirements, including the analysis of your track record, your cash flow, range of credit underwriting criteria that go into surety bonding. It's a little bit different than a loan. So next slide, please. To give you a little background on the application process and some of the things that you might need when you're doing surety bonding, there is an eligibility checklist that you can get from us through our surety bond assistance site. There's a contractor application that you complete. And then what happens, you submit that contractor application to us. You are then connected to a surety company, and that surety company underwrites your contract. So the surety company is going to reach back out to you, underwrite the program. That's out of the hands of Empire State Development. Once the surety company has underwritten you, then the surety company itself will complete an application back to us on behalf of you to request the assistance from the program. Once it's reviewed and accepted, then the handles, it's all behind the scenes. You don't see what's happening really. They take care of it on their side. In the event of a claim, the surety bond company is going to pay out, and then upon the furnished documentation, we reimburse the surety bond company for that portion that we are guaranteeing. Now, once you're matched with the surety bond company, there are some things that really all surety bond companies are going to be looking for at a minimum as part of their review of your business. So you're going to need 2 years of corporate financial statements. You're going to need personal financial documents. You're going to need copies of your personal tax returns. You're going to need personal credit reports. For anyone who's signing the indemnity agreements, accounts receivable and payable information, corporate credit reports, work in progress schedule for all open projects, along with a percentage completed, and the low and negotiated bids that have not yet been started. Because part of this, part of guaranteeing for surety bonding is they're going to be looking at what work you're currently doing and what you're planning to do, and you have the capacity to complete it. And proof of 10 to 20% project deployment capital or a line of credit for working capital to demonstrate access to capital. That's actually a place where the contractor financing program can link into this. So for more assistance with surety bonding, please reach out to Wayman in our New York City office. Her email address is here on the slide along with her phone number, and there is more information on our website. She is the best source to start this process if you need surety bonding. So now next slide, please. Now to change gears again, we're going to go back to a loan program. The Small Business Revolving Loan Fund Round 2 is another one of our SSBCI programs. This is a brand new program, really just launched June 30th. And this is a small business lending program that works through CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions, around the state that are non-traditional lenders that can offer small businesses loans. There are microloans and there are larger loans. A microloan for our purposes is between $500 and $25,000. A regular loan will be over $25,000. That they can offer low interest, reduced interest loans via this program. Essentially, what's happened is that we have lent them at a very, very low cost capital that they relend to the small businesses. Part of the program, the way it works is that they have to have, they're not allowed to use more than 50% of our capital in any one particular loan with a maximum of $125,000. So most lenders are going to be doing loans are going to be $250,000 or less because that's the way it's capped in our particular program. But these are small business loans, again, that they can issue for a variety of purposes: working capital, acquisition improvement of real property, acquisition of machinery and equipment, refinancing debt. In certain circumstances, refinancing debt, provided it provides a tangible benefit as far as interest rates are concerned, and that there's new activity going along with that debt obligation being refinanced. So this is one of our mainline small business lending programs. And you'll see that it's called Round 2, just as a frame of reference. This is based upon one that we started in 2010 that just ended very recently. Expect this one to go on for another 10 years. The original program was a $25 million fund, not a $55 million fund. And that $25 million fund executed over 50,000 small business loans that resulted, it was over $300 million in lending through the lenders that were part of the program. So this is a large program, and we expect this program to probably do twice as much because it's twice the size. So next slide, please. So how do you apply for one of these loans? There is a list of participating lenders on our website here. Next slide, please. Again, they are the primary point of contact for borrowers. I do have, for convenience here, I do have the list of the first 9 lenders that are part of this program. There'll be more lenders added during the course of the summertime and into the early fall, but there are going to be other lenders that are part of this program. Each lender, each CDFI that's part of the program will have its own application process. It has its own individual sizes of loans that it can offer and so forth, and its own service areas, because they are CDFIs. CDFIs are generally very localized. That's the nice thing about a CDFI is CDFI understands the marketplace in which they're operating. You know, they're very directly linked to the communities in which they're functioning. So they all have individual service areas. So you want to pick out one that belongs in your service area if you want to reach out for financing. Next slide, please. We have a full directory, by the way, of CDFIs. When I talk about how wonderful CDFIs can be, we have a full directory available on our website that has a list of CDFIs around the state. There are at least 60 that are currently listed in our site that can offer lending amounts anywhere from $500 to $4 million for a variety of purposes. There's no county in the state that has fewer than 5 CDFIs that cover their territory. Some of the downstate counties have 15, 16 different CDFIs that are all in that area that can all assist when you can't get capital from a traditional lender or traditional bank. So next slide, please. But not to leave traditional banks out, I do have one more program to talk about that does go through traditional commercial lenders. It's our Link Deposit program. This is one of our oldest programs. It's part of the Small Business Division. It's been around since the 1990s, but it's recently been enhanced with larger lifetime limits. And this is a program that when interest rates are rising the way they have been, this program really becomes super popular. The Link Deposit program can help you get an interest rate reduction on a mortgage or term loan for improving your business's competitiveness, expanding your markets, developing new projects, new technologies, so on and so forth, facilitating ownership transfers, modernizing your facilities, a vast array of things. They are through commercial lenders. They are through traditional commercial lenders, and they can provide up to a 2, sometimes even 3 percentage point savings over the prevailing interest rate on one of these loans that you're getting from a commercial lender. So the way it works, it's called a link deposit because the state of New York will make a deposit into that lender in a 4-year CD. And what happens is that New York State, instead of drawing interest on that 4-year CD, the interest that they would receive comes off of the cost of your interest rate for your loan. So the amount you can save as part of the program is based upon the 4-year CD rate of that lender with a maximum cap again of 2%. So when interest rates are low and lenders don't have large or high interest rates for their 4-year CDs, the benefit from the program is smaller. However, the way interest rates have gone up so much, a lot of lenders, now you can get that maximum 2%, has a big difference, has a big effect on getting a loan. So again, these are through commercial banks, savings loans associations, credit farm institutions, a vast array of conventional banks. There are 64 lenders in the state right now that are part of the program. Most of the major KeyBank, M&T, NBT, they're all major lenders in this program. Now, to be eligible for the program, you have to be a manufacturing firm with 500 or fewer employees based in New York State, or a service business, independently owned and operated, not dominant in your field, with 100 or fewer employees in New York State. So service businesses and manufacturing businesses are the focus of this particular program. Cannot be a startup, can't be a company headquartered outside of the state of New York. And also there are certain businesses that are usually not eligible. Not going to be really people that are listening right now, but personal service businesses that would be like a daycare or a funeral home or a salon, a professional service that would be like an organization that requires a license to operate like a lawyer or a doctor's office or an accountant or an engineering office, or a retail service or various retail stores, restaurants, and so forth, unless those particular businesses happen to be located in a highly distressed census tract, in which case they are still eligible. So they are still eligible in certain cases. But what I would do, if you are currently talking to a commercial lender, you have a relationship already, ask them next time you go to borrow money from them, ask them about the Link Deposit program. And if you look for more information on that, you can also go to our website, contact our Link Deposit helpline, or go to linkdeposit@isp.ny.gov if you have any questions for email. So next slide, please. So I know I just threw out a lot, but to wrap it all up, if you do have questions about any of these programs, for our access to capital programs, you can go to our Small Business Hub site. If you're looking for NISTAR related information, which I didn't really get to talk about, we do have the Innovation Development Support website you can go to for more information on NISTAR programs and our venture capital programs. If you're interested in more information, there's a separate venture capital site. So I know I covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time, but if you have any questions or if there are any questions I can answer, I'd be happy to try to.
And I, Matt, just want to start. We actually are going to put up another poll to see who on this forum is a small business. You can answer this. We'll get that sense. Again, what we want to do is make you aware of some of these programs. Again, the links to these, other portfolios, the range of programs that ESD has to support business operating and growing in New York is vast. I don't know that it's, that this sector has really taken full advantage of this. And so we really would like you to think about these programs for small business development. Obviously, there's a lot of, these key supports. But think about, any aspect of business development, look at these programs, and we want that feedback. Does anybody have any questions, particularly on what Matt reviewed?
And I would also add that a lot of these programs can assist you going back to MWBE. If you have a small business that you're working with that needs assistance that you think could be an MWBE subcontractor for you, but you're concerned about them having the operating capital or the line of credit that they might need to complete the work, you can recommend these programs, point these programs out to them. You can use this to support your work, even if what you yourself are doing and your organization itself doesn't quite fit what these programs do. So again, these are really for the smallest of small businesses. These are really for those small businesses that are starting out. It's about those, again, fewer than 100 employee businesses.
Okay, great. And as we can see, based on who's on the forum today, that's a majority of these participants. Again, if you've got any other questions or you want to follow up directly to inquire or get support participating or make sure you qualify for them, you can reach out to us. We can make an introduction to Matt or to the appropriate person in his division.
Yeah, and if the next slide does have my email address on it as well. There you go.
All right. Well, thank you. Again, any other questions? You can drop them in the chat or follow up. We can go to the next slide. I'm just going to give an overview, a quick overview of other things that are coming up. So we're going to be continuing this forum series. As I said, we have some ideas for topics based on what we need to make our own policy decisions on. But we're very open to your thoughts and suggestions for what we might cover in these forums. Certainly, we continue to encourage you to engage locally and regionally with local county government, with your digital equity coalitions. And if you have any trouble making those connections, please reach out to us. Next slide. Moving into the fall and winter, a lot of the policy decisions that we are in the process of gathering your input on now are going to be published in the context of our broadband equity access and deployment initial proposal, and that will be made available for public comment in the fall. We will notify you that it's available for public comment if you've been participating in these forums and we have your contact information. And then we'll also be making available the state digital equity plan for you to consider. And again, these things are all supposed to work together. So we encourage you to review and comment on those when they come out, and continue to give us input up until that point. Certainly, as we move into the fall and winter, think about particular projects, scoping. We are still developing our request for applications for some programs. And as we move into 2024, take go to the next slide. That's when a lot of the, after the initial proposal is approved, is when we can begin the grant application process, even though the full funding and awards won't really be available for that program until 2025. But this is part of the way that this program is structured, is we need to go through this preparation process. We really want your input now and to design it to be successful. And that includes, by the way, thinking about the project size. So you heard some of what types of financing supports might be available. One of the things we have to do is think about project size. NTIA gives us the flexibility to do it as small as a single location, or as really large as it takes to get the job done. So we want your input on what would be practical and feasible to maximize participation and the competitive participation in the program. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. So just following up on on everything you've heard today, we would love to either raise your hand or get your thoughts on what guidance or support should ConnectALL provide to internet service providers to promote supplier diversity and participation. And I think some things may have been implicit in the questions, but feel free to raise those again and maybe add some more of your experience and context for why you're asking that, or how it worked in the context of previous programs, or how you may be aware of it working in other states. And if you don't ask questions, we're expecting that it's because you already have all the answers of how to achieve supplier diversity and participation. So again, if you don't ask questions or look for our support right now in this forum, I strongly encourage you to follow up with any ideas or ways that we can facilitate that.
There is a question.
Dave, did I say? Oh, go ahead.
Is that me, Josh?
Yeah, I saw your hand go up. Go ahead, David.
One thing, just a thought, is to know who's on these calls. A roster and names and affiliations that could lead to partnerships.
So right, facilitating that, and I think that this is one of those things that in the more virtual age, where we've lost some of the get everybody together, right, maybe for a fair, and we do have, it's a good thought, a way to more actively facilitate connections. One thing that I might ask of you all is we might, I know we've got some sense of the relevant NAICS codes that help us then identify where there are existing vendors and where there may be certain less participation. So it might be helpful if we can have a back and forth with some of you all on the specific codes that you all look when you're searching, and that can make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what are the particular needs that we can help you fulfill that way.
There was a question in chat.
Will the stack be available on the ESD site? Yes, we're again looking to make these slides and this information available and follow up, along with a summary Q&A. Are there thank you, Sean. Are there particular things in particular NAICS codes or particular supplies that you feel like would be a good opportunity, but you've had a challenge in the past finding vendors? Okay, well, again, think about that, and we'll follow up to get your thoughts on that. So next question for you all: what guidance or support can or should ConnectALL provide to help you navigate the grant process? We saw at the beginning, many of you have been through this before, and want to hear your experience about how we can continually improve that for you, and make sure that it's efficient on the application and receipt side. Okay, and I see some other questions from Lee, and I do encourage everybody to submit any other questions. You can submit them directly to me, and either we will put them into a Q&A or they'll form the basis for a follow-up for another forum. Okay, and I mean, anything else? I mean, again, I think I've heard in the past that just making sure that we've got, a good and a robust team here to be your facilitators through that process, to work closely with loans and grants and the other parts of the workflow. We're in the process of continuing to build out our team here. But any other comments on the experience? Again, this is just, don't be shy about it, but I am assuming that it's because everything is perfect. You're not talking, it's because everything is perfect about the navigation of the ESD grant process.
Check chat again.
Let's see. I'm not gonna use your qualification of it as sitting on ARPA grants. But yes, ARPA funds are, so I think you're just speaking to the matching requirement, and can ARPA funds potentially be used as matching grants for BEAD? We can get into that again with our federal partners. I believe the answer to that is yes. But also I know that many of those counties are implementing programs on their own timeline, and we're working in coordination with them. But if there are any particular programs, any particular counties you think we should be speaking to, please let us know. Okay, any other comments or suggestions on
there was a
the
previous
ESD
question
grant process?
there. I don't know why I'm
What's
telling
that?
you. You missed a previous question. I don't know why I'm telling you.
The questions from Lee, I think we'll follow up on in terms of covering the setbacks. Prevailing wages, I will say, the legislature made it very clear that prevailing wages will be required. So that I think is an easy one. In terms of the high costs, that is something that actually you can weigh in on because that's one of the policy decisions we need to make that will be including in our initial proposal. Now that we have the FCC required locations in the budget for BEAD, that will inform how we make that determination based on how we expect to make use of the resources. But feel free to weigh in. And again, this is one of the reasons I know there are certain limitations on the access to capital program, but we are while sensitive to projects that you may see as challenging to bring the matching funds, we are also interested in making sure that we can maximize the availability and affordability of credit, of funding for all of you to bring in those matching funds, because it's a critical part of reaching our goal and maximizing the economic impact of the program. In terms of those two, Jim, those two questions on BABA, on Buy America, and the taxation of the grant money, those are a couple of those are federal aspects. Certainly the Buy America requirement is federal. I think that we're still anticipating guidance to come from NTIA on that. We can share the questions. And obviously, tax policy is not something that we directly, that we can control, but we can certainly take back that concern. And Sean, we will take that note and consider whether that's another discussion type topic for discussion. So in terms of business assistance and what you heard from the small business program, or just generally, maybe what you didn't hear that Matt reviewed in that array of programs, are there other types of business assistance that you would like to see ESD offer to potential ConnectALL grantees, or just to the sector generally? I would say I think some of those programs are specific to grant participation potentially, but others you may look at and say, maybe this is the opportunity to finance a new piece of equipment that I need for my own, operations. So just generally, in terms of Empire State Development's role in developing various business sectors across the state, this is a valuable one, and ConnectALL has that assignment to develop this business sector, not just by making grants, but making sure that we've got the right tools and assistance programs in place. So what are the types of business assistance programs that could be useful for you all to continue to grow and operate and be a healthy sector in the state, since it's crucial, not just for our programs, but for the communities that you serve every day. Any challenges with access to capital? Okay. All right, well then next steps are continuing these forums. Again, also we appreciate any help in promoting our broadband in your property survey to affordable housing owners. We are looking to build critical mass of participation in that from on the housing side to make that then available for grants to service providers. We've closed our statewide internet survey and completed our round of listening sessions. So we are synthesizing all of that information to incorporate into our 5-year action plan and state digital equity plan. We'll be continuing this virtual forum series. Again, let us know if there are particular topics of interest. We are submitting the 5-year action plan to NTIA at the end of August. And then the fall, our initial proposal and the digital equity plan will be open for public comment. In the meantime, again, please reach out. We greatly value the internet service providers and the service that you provide. That you continue to invest your own private capital, even in anticipation of and to meet the needs of New York residents and businesses, and in anticipation of the grant programs. So greatly appreciate that, the work you do every day, including through very challenging weather and environmental conditions. Greatly appreciate all that work. And again, please continue to reach out to me, reach out to my team to let us know how we can support you, and share any additional thoughts you have on how we can better facilitate your engagement with our contractor and supplier diversity program, our small business development and access to capital program, and generally access to our the loans and grants that we make available.
Hey, Josh, sorry to interject a question. In the interplay between the FCC maps and the PSC maps, I know the FCC allocation, the allocations were made based on the FCC maps, but are your when you do your challenge in the, I guess in the initial proposal, your challenge process, is that going to be based on the PSC maps or the FCC maps or what?
So as I understand it, the requirement for the challenge process is we have to begin with the FCC map, and only location for the BEAD program, only locations that are on the map, notwithstanding their classification as unserved, underserved, or served, but only locations that are on that map are eligible for BEAD grants. So we have to begin with that map, and the question for our challenge process is, are there modifications that we should make to that map to begin in terms of what we consider to be the right classification for unserved, underserved, or served. So that's an area of input. You know, the state map has been invaluable for informing how we approach our own participation in the FCC challenge process for that. And you know, will continue to be critical guidance for us to look at what modifications we should make, or rather should propose to NTIA to make, because they will have to approve it. But that's the area where getting input is very helpful, is what modifications should we make. And so, you know, if you want to dive deep into that, and you know, Dave, I'm sure in your case, you know, you're looking at the guidance, the challenge process guidance that NTIA has issued. And you know, they've got a model challenge process, but we're certainly open to input on what modifications we should make to the FCC map as part of our challenge process. Meaning, and by modifications, it's really like what becomes the default map that then goes out to be available for challenge, and that will determine, for example, whether you know, who is the burden of proof on whether it's set as served or unserved or underserved, to submit information to the state to then change that classification through the state challenge process.
So Josh, on the same, if I may, on the same topic, we did a physical walkout in 3 towns that we were thinking of expanding to, and we found almost no overlap between what we actually found and what the state map says is unserved in all 3 towns. So at the moment, at least in those 3, maybe it's, you know, just bad luck or something, or good luck, depending on which way you look at it. But my experience so far with the state maps is they're not useful.
Sorry, who was that speaking? I didn't have
Chuck Bartosh.
Master.
Oh, okay, Chuck. Well, you know, I can't speak.
These are by trained guys. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't speak specifically to what you found, but I think if you've got you know, the Public Service Commission, as part of their state mandated, you know, reporting and mapping requirement, will be releasing an update, and they have a process for refining those maps as well. So I think, you know, that'd be helpful to share that information. But I also would strongly encourage you to compare the information from that walkout or any other information you have to the FCC map to either challenge those locations, you know, or share with us if you think that there's any kind of systemic issue. But if you think that there's you know, an inaccuracy on the FCC map, either based on you know, past data, you know, I would just encourage you to look into challenging those locations. You know, it won't at this point change our allocation, but one of the things we can also determine, you know, make a decision on is whether we're going to work from the May 30 FCC data release or the November 30 data release. And if we hear from you all that there still are significant challenges to make and potential correction and improvements to make the FCC map, that's a reason to use. Or by the way, if you anticipate significant changes based on your own organic build in the meantime, then, you know, that would be a reason that you'd want us to work from the November 30th map. So I believe that FCC has advised September 1 as a date to get challenges in to make sure that they can be resolved in time for the November 30 release. So if you have any questions about the FCC broadband data collection process and those challenges, we can facilitate conversations with the FCC. And if you have any questions about how to share possible refinements on the state map with the Public Service Commission, I believe you all are in direct conversation with them, but certainly we can help with that as well.
All right, thanks. That helps.
And I just want to say again, I really appreciate all the work that you all have done participating in the broadband data collection system at the federal level, the broadband assessment program at the state level. It is incredibly helpful for us to have those data sets to be working from, and we appreciate the ongoing conversations and the challenge process with you all, where we submitted challenges and we had an opportunity to go back and forth with many of you. We encourage also any opportunities to share with us the detailed information that you have about those locations, so we can get the best sense that we have as we go into developing our cost proposal, our challenge process, and ultimately our overall initial proposal. So I know that was a little off topic, but I think it's because you had a lot to absorb, and we had a chance for Q&A on the particular aspects. But I again want to thank my ESD colleagues for the work that they do every single day to facilitate business development across the state, but particularly Danielle, Brendan, Matthew, and presentations about contractor and supplier diversity, loans and grants, small business development. Thank you very much for your time today, and again, thank you all. We'll be following up with any questions we didn't resolve in this forum. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.